Welcome, folks, to Our City Matters. Today we have Matt Courchesne with us, and he is the Executive Director of Hope, New Hampshire. He was with us on Education Matters, and he said he would come back and give us an update, so here he is. Thanks, Matt, for coming today.
Well, thank you very much, Deb. It's good to see you again. I just wanted to come on. I think part of what our mission is now is getting the word out there of what we've done. For the past 6 years, I've worked in the Manchester School District through another nonprofit, then as a designated school volunteer, then as the Executive Director of Hope. And I wanted to get out and let people know what's going on in the Manchester School District, the needs that have to be addressed out there, and the good work that the Hope program's doing. So.
Yeah, well, tell us what some of the needs are and the spectrum of students that it affects.
Well, I think then that's the why, and part of the problem, and I don't even just think that this is a Manchester School District problem, I think this is an overall problem, is the overall disconnect with everything that's going on. What I mean by that is there seems to be a disconnect here with the school board and the aldermen. There's a disconnect between administration and teachers. There's a disconnect between parents and kids. And it's ultimately, what I'm saying is, it's not about how we're teaching these kids. It's about solving the problems that are distracting us and bridging those gaps. And I think the biggest problem is the relationships. Things have changed. And I think a lot of people my age and older who remember their school experience don't necessarily understand how much it has actually changed. And a big thing with that is the respect and relationships that the people who are involved have.
Like the teachers with the students, how much time they get to engage and learn about the students' personal situations or personal lives?
Correct. So things have changed, and it's making that connection with them. But as you know, there's overcrowding in the schools. There's these new testing mandates, and there's different pressures on the teachers that weren't there before. I guess it's as simple as this: when I got into trouble at school, my mother didn't say, "Well, what did the teacher do?" It was, I got in trouble at school, then I went home and I got into trouble at home. And that was it. It seemed to be that it was the teachers and the parents versus the students, and now it seems like the teachers are the ones who are being vilified and the ones that are being asked why, and why did you do this, or what are you doing? And I'm certainly not saying that teachers are perfect, because there's not, but nobody is.
There's a lack of trust?
Correct. So one of the big things that we talk about is respect builds trust, trust builds loyalty. So ultimately for me, we have an insurance policy out for my kids, so if anything goes wrong, it's on me. It's a $2 million liability insurance policy. It allows me to put kids in the car, which isn't being done anymore. Nobody wants to put kids in their car because they're worried about the liability there. One of the things that I'm proud of is, I laugh with my kids, I cry with my kids, and I hold my kids accountable. So if that means raising my voice, then I raise my voice. And it's ultimately doing what you need to do to get these kids to care and believe. And that's ultimately my biggest thing. Is the biggest problem we have is that not enough kids care about themselves, and they don't believe in themselves, or adults.
So the students are referred to you by either a teacher or a principal?
Sure. So the referral process, we had 88 referrals last year for 10 open slots. And that's just basically my relationships built with the teachers. And they believe in what I'm doing, and they ultimately identify the ones who are at risk the most. And that's something that needs to be brought up too, Deb, is what the whole program is saying is that every single kid is at risk. And it's not just your bottom 20% anymore that we need to be worrying about. We need to be worrying about all kids. And I'm not here to bring you data on that. I'm here to tell you, take the eye test and just look around and watch the world news, watch the local news, watch what's going on. I mean, a big thing that we were just talking about before we went on the air was the heroin epidemic. And if you don't think that is somewhere related to the education system in Manchester, then I believe that you're wrong. There was a study done, I think in 2008, in Manchester, and one of the questions was, 25% of kids in Manchester who are at high school are so disappointed and frustrated and depressed that it's affecting their schoolwork for up to 2 weeks. Meaning kids are so depressed and they just feel hopeless that it's affecting their schoolwork. And that's ultimately what we're trying to define.
Is it things going on in the school, the programs in the school, or the way they're teaching in the schools, or is it primarily families that are distressed?
Well, I think it's everything. I think
It's
everybody's
everything?
throwing their hands up in the air and saying, what can we do about this? And that's what I'm saying is we need a leader. And really what I'm out here talking to the community about is I want to be a leader in this community and bring back the Manchester School District and get these kids to care and believe and start producing better results. And it's not data-driven results. We're going after their heart and their souls. We're certainly going after their minds too.
Do you think that the psychologists and the counselors in the schools, this is just way too much for them to handle, or they can only do so much?
Well, sure. I mean, there's one school psychologist at the middle school that I'm at, and I'm sure that she has a million different things going on, and to sit there and focus on just one issue at hand is a tough thing to do. So that's ultimately what we're doing. We're bridging the gaps, and we're not looking for the whole program is not looking for short-term solutions. We are looking for long-term solutions. And it's not put the Band-Aid on the problem, it's meet it head on.
So do you sit with the students at their school and kind of do a little mentoring there?
Sure. So what was happening was in the 7th and 8th grade, I had a class at Southside Middle School. That's no longer happening because through the superintendent and it looks like through the principal at Southside, they didn't think that the program was impactful enough, so we actually had to take a step back.
They take away funding?
They weren't funding me at all anyways, and part of what I was saying was that the school district needs to fund me in some capacity and help me out in some capacity because I'm not only the executive director, I'm also running the program too. So ultimately I had to take a step back, and what I need to do right now is be the executive director of the program, not the mentor of the program. The way that we're staying in touch with the kids still is via phone and calls.
Oh, so you can't see them in the school anymore? They're not
Well,
allowing you?
No, that's not true. They haven't done that. What is going on is I have a 6-month-old kid, and it's about taking care of him now, and I have to take care of my family. So during the day, usually I have my child, so I can't just go into the schools. So it's all outside
So your
of the school.
schedule has changed? Your
Right, so
schedule.
my schedule's changed
So
too.
the students can't meet with you on school grounds, on school property?
Well, they're not right now. I'm not saying that they couldn't. I'm just saying they're not
okay.
right now. And some of that was through, at Southside Middle School, there was an influx in students, so there was rooming issues and stuff like that. Ultimately, I think where I failed was getting the message out of what we were doing and getting enough. I got the kids to believe, and now it's all about getting the adults to believe. And, it's not about me, it's not about the whole program, it's about a campaign to change things and to make Manchester a better, and that's ultimately my focus now. It's almost education reform, but if we're talking education reform, then we're also talking societal reform too. We need society to change. We need to start putting more belief and trust into people, like we said, and ultimately when people respect you and trust you, they're loyal to you, and that's ultimately what I've built. So it's getting the message out. And just to go back to what you were saying, I had kids in the 7th and 8th grade, and that's where I built my relationships with them. And it was through listening and talking, it was through life skills, it was through conflict resolution, it was through dealing with truancy. Manchester has one truancy officer, and there's over 300 kids truant every single day. So there you go, that's like the psychologist. How are you going to solve those problems when the resources aren't there? So what the whole program was doing was meeting those gaps. So if my kids were truant, I would go pick them up at their house or go track them down and bring them into school.
The ones that were accepted into your program, which was minimal students, I mean...
Right, so
out of
the problem's even
300,
huge.
yeah.
Absolutely, correct, absolutely. And that's just, so that's 20 kids at one school. What about all the other schools? And I mean, those are the things that we need to address, but here's the problem is, are the taxpayers willing to pay for that or not? And it's just... That's what I mean. Everybody's throwing their hands up and saying, well, who's going to pay for it, who's going to do it? But
If we don't catch them in 6th or 7th grade, then will they become, child delinquents when they're in the next grade.
Right, so it's as simple as this, Deb, pay now or pay later.
That's what everyone's saying.
Because if we're not paying for them now, we're going to pay down the road, because if you look at the facts, how much does it cost for an 18-year-old dropout? Right now, 20% of 18 to 24-year-olds are doing nothing. They're not in school, they're not have a job, and they're not in the military, which means ultimately they're either not doing good things or we're already paying for them. And it's just addressing that problem. And everything is so complex, and they want it, everybody wants to focus on one issue or another issue. The whole program's not like that. So if, say, one of our kids is homeless, right? I'm not just going to call the homeless liaison and say, hey, you need to work with this kid. I'm going to bring that kid to the homeless liaison. I'm going to set it up. I'm going to be in that appointment, and we're going to do whatever it takes to get that job.
So you're that child's advocate and mentor.
Mentor.
You've taken him as one of your students, and now you're going to follow him so that he gets the services he needs.
Right, whatever it takes.
And what, so that he has, maybe can get his grades up, or you can help him with his homework. I mean, how does that all?
Absolutely.
Because while you're helping him with his homework, you're having discussions.
Right, and not only that, that's the whole thing with building those relationships with the teachers. And what I can tell you is I miss the teachers at Southside. I miss the kids, but I miss the teachers too. And the thing was, we had such a good relationship. Everybody's so complex, and we're talking about Common Core and lattice math, and then we do something for a year, and then we get rid of it. We spend all this money to implement it, but then we get rid of it. And what we're saying is it's as simple as we can teach the kids any way you want to. It's, can you get them to care and believe? And that is where the disconnect is. And it's a disconnect between everybody. For me and the Hope program, it's talking with the parents, it's talking with the student, it's talking with the teachers, it's talking with the administration.
For the best interest
it's
of the
talking to
child.
Manchester PAL, it's talking to GSIL, it's talking to Manchester Community College. It doesn't matter. And then one of the things that that the whole program is most proud of is we also bring, one of our biggest missions is to identify another positive adult role model in their lives. We brought the Southern New Hampshire women's soccer team in to talk to my 7th and 8th grade students. And what we talked about is, you might think that these girls who are white and they come from, affluent communities, they're doing well in school and they're doing well in athletics. By the way, they're 6-1 right now, so we're very proud of them there. But they have problems too. Everybody has problems, and ultimately that's where you're defined. And the Southern New Hampshire soccer team was supposed to be there for 2 weeks. They ended up staying the whole year. And it was just built on relationships. And, I think it was a two-way street too. Not only did those girls help our kids, but our kids helped those girls realize how lucky they were in some aspects too,
So they were helping to mentor these girls?
Yeah, yep. So I would say last year we brought in over 50 adults, meaning 18 and above, role models to talk to the kids. And not only that, my kids who are 18 and above, who are either have a tax-paying job or in the military or in college, they come back and work with the kids. That's one of the things. There's a ton of high school kids who want to come back and meet with the Southside staff or whatever, but because there's so many issues in regards to what's going on in society, they're almost afraid to have them come back because it's a liability issue or a safety issue. You know what I mean? We're saying, and this is why it's so tough, and is because we're saying there's so many things that are wrong, and we need to, how do you get people to take a step back, There was a commercial on I saw the other day about how can we sleep faster? It was just that's what they were talking about, you know what I mean? And it's, how do we get people to take a step back? How much more do we need? How much more do we need? And how much more do we have to make things easier in our lives, I think the adult population needs to start understanding what these kids are going through. And I completely understand that, my Nana and my Papa went through the tough times in the 30s and stuff like that. But this is a whole different issue of problems that these kids are facing. And it's tough. It's tough to be a kid. And it's tough because everybody knows what's going on in your life. And when you screw up, it's made public via Facebook or whatever. So, those are the issues that we're talking about, We're certainly talking about science and math, but we're also talking about, be good to one another. What a true friend is. What is real love? What are the issues going on in America right now? Who the heck is Martin Luther King? And he's not just a guy who made a speech. He's a guy who sacrificed his life and did things to create change, my last thing here, and then we can move on, but I talk to my refugee kids about, take a look at how lucky you are. I know you've gone through some serious stuff, but just imagine your friends or your family who's still back in the Sudan, who would die to have the opportunity that you have right now. And how are you going to face that, and how are you going to make them proud? It's serious, it's impactful, it's real. And that's what this program is about. And it just continues on. In that 7th and 8th grade, the relationship is built, and it's so strong that I go into the high schools. And it's the same thing. So I had to do the same thing in Memorial High School. I had to go make relationships with the teachers to go help my kids and to get them to go talk to their teachers. And it's all relationship building, which creates resources. So, for example, a relationship with their teacher provides them the resource to get extra help that creates the opportunity for them to get a better grade. And that's what it's all about. And that's what I think the school board needs to start focusing on. I think that's what the superintendent needs to be focusing on. That's what the parents need to be focusing on. That's what the community needs to be focusing on.
So you're working on the individual level. The individual, you're taking that individual and helping that individual to succeed, but to build some life skills and some awareness of his place in society.
Right, right. Awareness.
And how to manage himself with society.
Right, and love that word, Deb. Great job. Awareness and conscientiousness. If you look, conscientiousness is becoming the #1 indicator for workplace success. And it's almost like everybody has their blinders on and nobody is aware of what's going on around them. It's all about them. But whose fault is that? That's our fault. That's the adults' fault, because that's all they see. That's all they see. And I'm not talking about just parents. I'm talking about turning the television on, you know? Look at the Real Housewives of New York and how they're treating each other and how they're talking to each other. And people are eating that up. People are eating that up. And I'm not saying, you know, now we're getting into serious stuff, and is that just entertainment or whatever, you know, and I'm certainly not infringing on anybody's entertainment. But that's part of what I'm saying. I grew up with the Wonder Years in Full House, you know, and now they're growing up with Teen Mom and reality. And I think as adults we got to realize that and catch up with them and really talk and care. And that's all we're trying to do. And you know, Mark Zuckerberg he gave $100 million to Newark, New Jersey, because that's where he was from. And they were gonna, now here's a whole other issue, but charter schools. They wanted to improve charter schools
In New Jersey?
Right, and they were saying that's the answer, because ultimately, if you look at it, it started with President Bush and No Child Left Behind, and then it was continued on through President Obama with Race to the Top. Ultimately, what they're saying is, well, how are we going to evaluate teachers? And that is a tough, tough question. My only solution to that, and what they're saying is, well, it's going to be through the kneecaps and now the Smarter Balanced test scores. And I think you were the one that told me, Deb, they're getting rid of Smarter Balance now?
I think they are, yeah, because parents don't like it. There's issues with that assessment, and I think they're going, at least in the Manchester School District and in New Hampshire at large, they're doing a more PACE system, which I'm not certain the whole thing about PACE, but they're weekly assessments, because Smarter Balance was a 9-hour test,
Yep.
or a 9-hour assessment done in a few hours at a time. And so instead of doing that over a week's time, they'll just do a little bit each week. But that assessment is still being done and still going to be going to the federal government for whatever reasons. And the child's privacy could be at risk as well.
Well, I would say part of those reasons is that the people who are actually producing those tests, the people getting paid for the implementation of those tests, are getting that money. And if you look at it, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, you know, they're giving, it might millions, I know hundreds of millions of dollars.
If not billions.
Right, if not billions, and that's great, but then they're dictating how things are done. And, you know, that's part of my fight right now, Deb, is I'm saying I'm ready to get political. I'm ready to get political, and let's talk, Manchester School District members. I'm ready to talk to you about the real problems. I'm ready to talk to the aldermen. I've been talking to the mayor. I've been talking to the superintendents. And it's getting people to believe my message.
Common Core has an agenda, but it's not reaching those students that you're helping to manage. It's not reaching them.
Right.
the Common Core agenda.
And then there's other things that go into that. You know, there's kids with IEPs. They're counted the same way. There's kids with severe special needs. They're being counted the same way in those tests and those assessments. And so it goes back to, how can we hold teachers accountable? I mean, that is, because I think that's ultimately a big thing, is there are some good teachers and some bad teachers in many people's eyes. And the only way that I feel that they can truly be held accountable is to bring an independent source into the schools and actually sit in their classrooms. And it's not looking at them for an hour and saying, oh, you're a good teacher or a bad teacher. And then now we're talking about, well, we also got to get to the colleges and say, well, how are these colleges preparing these teachers to teach? Because I know when I was in college, they weren't telling me, what do you do when 14 kids' heads are down on the desk? You know, they weren't telling me that. What are you doing when a kid's only reading at a 3rd grade level and he's in a 7th grade history class? You know, those are the things. I mean, I can't just go up here and say, hey, things need to change. You know, you got to have those ideas, and that's ultimately what we're trying to do is, you know, the way colleges are teaching these teachers needs to change too. I mean, where are they getting most of their experience? It's being actually in the schools creating the change, not theorizing about it, you know? And
I don't know. I think the teachers are overwhelmed.
oh, I agree. Absolutely. I just said I miss those teachers. I miss them because they were awesome. And that was the whole thing. We worked together, and we did get the best out of those kids. We did. And it wasn't just because they were getting a B on their test. It was because they were building those relationships. And those kids don't forget their teachers. I had one girl say to me, I go, what was your biggest, now this girl's in high school, what was your biggest mistake that you made in 7th and 8th grade? And she said this to the kids. She said, the way I treated my teachers. That was her biggest mistake. It wasn't like she got straight F's so she didn't learn or anything like that. It was all about humanizing things, and that's ultimately it. She felt bad for the way that she spoke to her teachers, you know, and that's something that these middle school teachers don't get either, is they don't get to see those kids transform and grow up. They're just taking the punches every single year over and over again, you know, and you talked about 6th and 7th grade, getting them to 6th and 7th grade. We got to get them even earlier.
Oh, my goodness.
We got to get, you know, 0 to 3 is the most important time in their lives, you know, and that's reading to them and taking care of them and talking to them. I'm going through it right now, you know. E-I-E-I-O, you know, I don't know how many times I sing that song a day, but it's being there for my child, and I'm lucky enough to have that opportunity right now. And not everybody is as lucky for that to happen. And, you know, you talk about Franklin Roosevelt telling the nation and the country to pull your bootstraps up, which means help yourself. That's what that means, is you got to help yourself. We need to start helping each other, and we need to start helping ourselves. And
Do you think we've institutionalized children? We're institutionalizing.
meaning what? To talk more
well,
about it.
I have a degree in early childhood education, and when I was working in a preschool, I had 20 students, 20 children, 20 babies, really, you know, 3, 4 years old, and even 2-year-olds. I mean, they wanted lap time. They wanted to sit on my lap.
Yep.
I couldn't put 20 children on my lap.
Yeah.
And there's certain things children need, developmentally appropriate, that I don't think they're getting.
Well, nowadays, you put a kid on your lap and then you open up another can of worms.
Yeah.
And that's ultimately what I'm saying, Deb, is for the whole program, we were running on autonomy. It was either what we were going to do or that was it. And I just told you that I hugged my kids. I've told my kids that I love you. Some of them end the conversation
They've
with
never
it.
gotten that. They've never gotten that.
Or maybe they got it and they just want more, you know?
Or maybe they just need a hug that day to move on.
But because of the 2% of the population who is screwing it up for the 98%, you know, the silent majority. That's part of what I'm here to say, is the people who care and believe and understand what I'm saying, we need to join forces, and the only way to change things is by everybody being together.
It almost sounds like you can't do it all yourself.
No, obviously I can. Now I'm here.
Not with all those students that need help.
Right.
And we have a couple minutes left, but
Yeah.
so you're here to ask the community?
I'm asking for community support, and it's calling, you know, the way things happen is I can see it's very political. Everything is political here, and we need to start getting these politicians to understand what the true problems are. And, you know, call your representative of your ward. My kids and their parents certainly call the mayor, call the superintendent. It's a movement. Like I said, it's not about me. It's not about the Hope program. It's about changing things in Manchester. I'm a Manchester kid. This is a Manchester program, born and raised. I had help from all kinds of adults who I believed in, and ultimately I made my mistakes. Don't get me wrong. I still make mistakes, but it's an overall, the values and the morals in my life is I want to be a good person. You look at the Pope all weekend, and he's the most powerful man in the world, but he's the most simplest man in the world, too.
I mean, so it's not just money that you need. Is it personnel that you need in your program?
Well, obviously expansion. Everybody wants the expansion, so I would hope that I could get this program into all of the middle schools and then transform it into the high schools, you know? And not only that, I was talking to Pete Lebelzik, who's a great guy, principal at Jewett Street School, about starting an after-school program there, because all my kids have to do is walk over and start working with those kids, working with them. It's about caring and believing, and that's what we got to start
Why, is
doing.
there no after-school program there?
No, I'm sure there is, but maybe there is. Actually, you'd have to ask Pete. But, you know, this would be something extra.
With a special agenda that... or
Right, and we'd
program.
be dealing with those, you know, they talk about ACEs, their adverse childhood experiences that these kids are going through, and it's ultimately hurting them in their education because they can't deal with that, you
So
know.
it would be a program just for them.
Conflict resolution, and then the other hour would have been, I have my buddy who's a gym teacher at Pinkerton who was willing to come in and work with the kids there and do some type of activity and get them involved. Or it's just something as simple as going to the Memorial Baseball game. Get them involved.
So how can they get in touch with you? We're wrapping up.
Well, you can go to the Hope website, hopenh.org, and certainly leave your comments there. That's part of what I have to do is my Facebook page has to get better, which I'm certainly working on. So be looking for me at Facebook, and I got to start accepting friends, and I got to start doing my executive work, and I got to start this campaign to save Manchester. And it's not through policies, it's through being a good person, and that's what we got to be pushing. And I've got nothing to lose. And I'm going to be making my move, and you're going to be seeing more of me. I would love to come
Okay.
back and talk
Well,
with you
let's
some
come
more.
back because we're
Yep.
wrapping up
All
on
right.
this half-hour show. So we'll see you next time, folks, on Our City Matters. Thank you for coming, Matt.
Thank you.